So next up we have Don Levett.
I've got a few angles on this. I also campaigned for the Remain side and then voted out. So maybe a bit more on that later. But what I wanted to discuss was the power of narratives to change. And drawing on my Tottenham experience, one thing that was very clear with Tottenham is its reputation continued to cause it enormous damage after Broadwater Farm initially, and then after the riots again latterly, in terms of people having this sort of vision of Tottenham as a dangerous place, people not wanting to visit, therefore less money going to shops there, fewer jobs being available. People who grew up in Tottenham found themselves not even invited to interview on account of their postcodes. So you had a sort of reputation that continued to damage the place. It created a reality. And if you look at the aftermath of the credit crunch, I would invoke the name of Lord Mandelson here, he actually saw the importance after the credit crunch to get out there and make sure Britain wasn't talked down and people didn't continue to do business with us or invest in us. And he saw how you had this positive feedback loop where the more something is seen as negative, the more that becomes a reality. Okay. And so I just want to touch on the problem with the current narratives we have right now. And a good illustration of what's going on here is the disconnect between the media and social media and the reality on the ground. So if you look at the referendum campaign, I think a lot of people were caught by surprise by the results. And what you had is a set of relationships between the pollsters, the betting markets, and the media, which were all feeding off of each other, and actually quite divorced from reality on the ground. And I think there was one pollster I saw who actually recognized this for what it was, which was Lord Hayward, who also called the general election for the Tories last time round. And he did something that I see very few people doing, which is he took all the modeling he was doing, but he also understood that with models, if you have one or two bad assumptions, garbage in, garbage out, they're as good as useless. And he took the time to talk to people around the country. And what you found talking to people around the country was a far larger appetite for Leave than was appreciated in the media at the time. And he called the referendum as out, and indeed he was correct. And now I'm seeing the emergence, we're all seeing the emergence of new narratives, which I think are very damaging. So we have total economic Armageddon, we have the idea that the country is thick, insular, bigoted, and racist, and we have the idea that being of the UK is something to be ashamed of. Now, when I ran the Brexit conference, a chap from London First, which is a sort of trade association for business in London, he had by far and away the most interesting slide at the event, which detailed, had about 8 different data points from various different groups, estimating the impact on UK GDP if the UK were to leave the EU. And what was interesting about this slide is each data point perfectly correlated with the ideological position of the organization making the prediction. So what you actually had is these narratives threading through everything. And if you look at the campaigns, you actually had two sides effectively immersed in Soviet-style political technology. This was all emotional manipulation with some fairly callous disregard to the facts. And if you look at the inside use of models, economic models, what was quite interesting is they didn't include any upside. And I think one of the big mistakes they made was they over-egged their position. Okay, one more minute. So just to draw on Kunle's point, the other narrative I wanted to touch on was bigotry, this idea that it's shameful to be British, it's little England, not Great Britain. And of course, this sends the message to the world, don't invest, don't visit, don't move here. But if you look at the data, 84% of Brits polled by ICM were absolutely adamant that people already here from the EU should be allowed to stay. And international polls show that we're in the lowest band internationally, globally, for racism here. And so just my final points here, to treat these narratives as real, there's 3 different things. It gives racist company, as Frankie Boyle said recently in The Guardian, do you want the right to start acting if the Brexit vote was a mandate for racism, in which case stop telling them that it is. 2, it means people here from abroad feel that half the country is against them, and that's absolutely not true. And thirdly, it damages our international reputation, leading to less investment and indeed less immigration. And ultimately, all of this comes to bring about precisely the opposite of precisely what those pundits fear, and indeed what I fear. And it's why events like this are so important to shatter the idea that 52% is so simplistic and crude in its approach.
Great. Right.